Hey folks, welcome to my channel, Stock Music Musician, and in this video I'm going to show you how to master a hip-hop track. This is going to be pretty quick and dirty. I'm going to walk through the hip-hop mastering chain and just sort of go to work and do this quickly. If you really want to go in-depth with mastering, I've got a free live mastering workshop. It's going to be a couple hours long. It's going to be this Wednesday, aka tomorrow, night 7 Eastern. There's a link down below to sign up, totally free. I want to see you there. I want to teach you all there is to know about mastering. If you're not watching this live though, that there will be a recording of the workshop, so you can always click on the link and attend later. I guess let's listen to it all with and without the mastering on. So with that said, I don't want to waste any of your time. We're going to jump right into mastering this song and just talking about the signal chain. So the first thing I've done is just exported the stem of the track. I'm going to listen to it unprocessed. I've kind of set a loop to the loudest part of the track so that we can focus on that. And we're not going to... If you master listening to the quietest part, then you could start clipping things or overdriving your compressors when you get to the loudest part. So that's why we focus on the loudest part. Because I just want to move quick, I'm not going to do anything with using a reference track here, but you definitely do want to use a reference track when you master. And also, it helps to know, like, I don't have any bus processing on this track, so I will be doing more work mastering this track than maybe I would if I'd used a bus compressor or other bus processing prior to starting to master. But I intentionally that's not my workflow, so you might be able to ignore some of the steps that I do here. Let's listen. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in setting up our mastering chain, we'll just switch over to mixer view because I think that'll be easier, no, we don't want that EQ. The first thing we're going to do is put a gain plugin at the very beginning because gain staging is important. I'm going to be using a lot of analog modeling plugins, so it's really important for me to get the volume consistent, and also it'll let us just sort of get the best out of everything. And the next thing I want to do is actually add a separate level meter. This is a free plugin by TB Pro Audio. This is just fantastic because it will ensure that we're right here, more or less, which is negative 18 dB, which is the ideal level for these analog modeling plugins. And it'll also help keep us honest that we're not making things better just because we're adding volume. There's like our ears just think, things sound better when they're louder. So let's set the gain real quick. All right, that's good enough. That's within 0.4, we're good. It might go over a little bit in some places. There are other additional metering things you could use. For example, Isotope has something called tonal balance control, which is just going to sort of give us some visual information about how the song works in the frequency spectrum. So if we were to select, and these sorts of things can be really helpful guides. So. Not quite enough low end here, or high mids. So cool. That's something we'll keep in mind as we go forward. So now that we've got, basically we're going to keep these meters at the end so we can keep end of our signal chain so we can keep them dialed in. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in a, and you don't have to use fancy plugins for this, but I'm just doing sort of like a tube saturation type plugin. To kind of just get a little sizzle and also I'm going to add a little bit of low end with this EQ boost. So basically, let's make sure we keep the levels consistent, but try and get a little more sizzle. And off. You notice we gained a dB there. We'll just take that off. And actually, I'm going to step it down and overdrive it. All right, so the quick and dirty of that is just adding a little warmth and a little low end. The next thing I'm going to do is subtractive EQ. And this I really like to use just straight up ozone for. And I use the mastering assistant here because what it does is it finds the unnaturally bad portions of the recording that like I just can't hear either because my room has resonances, my speakers are weak, my ears are blown out, whatever, and uses AI processing to sort of figure out what's bad. And I use this as a starting point. It's going to set all the parameters, but I'm just going to use this for subtractive EQ. It's going to get loud in a second. I apologize. So we're going to go in, we're going to take the maximizer out, and we're going to take the compressor out. Like I said, you don't need to use like expensive plugins. This is just a regular old EQ. It has just gone in and found some frequencies, and I don't want any of these boosts in. I'm not trying to boost. I'm just trying to find a few areas where there is some harshness, and it seems to think it's overhyped in the middle. And, you know, that can just be a result of my prejudices in the room or whatever. So you can also figure this out by ear, but let's listen to what it sounds like. That works. And then it also smartly finds some resonances and uses a dynamic EQ to take these out. And that's just a little clearer and cleaner. And now that we've taken out some of the bad frequencies, we can safely use a compressor, a bus compressor or a glue compressor, to kind of bring things together and help sort of just glue it together, add a little more groove. So what I'm going to use here is the Universal Audio 3309C. And basically all we're looking to do here is add like 1 to 2 dB of compression, and the purpose of this compression is to make your head bob just a little bit more. So initially we're going to dial in, this is the compressor section here, and we're going to dial in a lot more compression that we need, and then we'll back it off once we get the amounts right. So you hear it pumping there, and that is what I want to happen. but obviously I don't want to kill the dynamics of the track. The point here is to just do ever so much that it helps accentuate the rhythm here. This is not trying to control anything. And off. And let's check the meter and make sure we have not added gain. Looks like we have, so. But really not much, but it already feels louder and more glued. We're still in the basic ballpark. I'm not going to worry about a half decibel for this. Now, what I like to do, now that we've got some of that in, is add just a touch of clipping for a hip hop track, because this will let it hit harder but not really distort too much, not change the character too much. Basically, the difference between clipping and compression is that compression turns down the volume, which can suck some of the dynamics out, whereas with clipping, it shaves the top right off and uses distortion to kind of approximate what's happened, which when used poorly is awful. But if you want something to knock in hip hop a little bit, if you can take just a little bit off, it lets you raise the volume of everything else, and you don't really take too much of a dynamic hit. This is a really great plugin here. It's like $35. Really makes a difference. Soft Clip Classic. Let's turn on some oversampling just to protect it. But I'm worried about frame rate, so whatever. We'll listen. We'll figure it in. So I'm going to try and dial in like maybe 1 dB of clipping here. And you see these peaks are just getting... So what I wanted to look at, first I want to look at the numbers, and then I want to look at the listen to it. So that's the peaks that I want you to pay attention to. This is the input and this is the output. So basically the peaks here are 11 minus 11, and the peaks here are minus 9.5. That means you've almost gotten a dB and a half of extra headroom where you can turn everything up, but I don't think there's much of a noticeable difference in sound. So let's listen, on and off. Off. On. And I guess we can just do B. Off. In some ways, actually, it sounds even throatier and more punchy with the clip on. So I like what that does, right? Basically, you just give it a little haircut, which then lets you turn everything else up once we get to that final couple of stages. Again, I want to invite you to join that free mixing workshop tomorrow, or if you're watching this later, to click the link and watch the replay, because we're really going to dive into all of this and what all this means and why, but this is sort of just a very quick and dirty preview. The next thing I'm going to use is something called a maximizer, and most of these plugins, you can get anything. Your DAW even probably includes something standard that can replace it, but this is one of those weird and random plugins that just makes everything better. And it's magical, and this one is one that I would recommend. The Sonics Oxford Inflator, or the Sonics. Okay, so now we've added the Sonics Oxford Inflator, or we're about to add it, which is just sort of a magical sound gooderizer. It makes things appear to be perceivably louder by using some weird things without actually making them louder somehow. And it's just a really cool plugin, especially for something like hip hop where you want it to be loud and aggressive and forward. So we've got the meter up. I have not turned the inflator on yet. And looks like we've actually lost some gain with standard clip, which makes sense. So we can add a dB of gain here. And now let's turn the inflator on. Doesn't it already sound a little louder? You have to be careful with this. It can quickly sound over the top, like we'll turn it all the way up, but so this is like all in, but it sounds way louder. But that's not what we're going for. We'll do a more judicious use. We'll bring you back to 0. A little bit of the curve just sort of affects how it does it. Let's see if the band split where it separates them out. Off. Yeah, that feels a lot louder than otherwise, and so I think that's a good direction for this song without having to compromise too much in terms of tone. So now what I want to do is add a additive EQ. This is sort of like, all right, we noticed that there wasn't quite enough high end and low end. So now that we've done all the like dynamic processing to control things and taken out all the bad stuff, we're going to add in some good juicy stuff. And here we're going to use just the go-to Pultec. And there's a lot of emulations of this. You can use any EQ, but sort of these vintage programmatic EQs, as they're called, tend to sound the best. So we'll start with the EQP1A. This is the standard classic one where you boost and cut, and because they have different frequency ranges, you get a good sound. That's too much there, but I'm just 30 better than 60. I feel like 30 is sounding pretty good. And let's boost, broad boost, up top. Let's see, we've added some gain, so let's bleed it back off. Without. I think that's definitely helping, and let's double check it with the tonal balance control and see where we're at. So now we're actually all pretty much in there. I feel like we need a little more attenuation if we're going to go up to 60. You obviously got to trust your ears and not rely too much on you know, dials, but at the same time, you have to realize that you're limited by your tools in your ears in your room and everything, and you should always be referring to references and meters and stuff to kind of help figure things out. So we want a little attenuation. No, I don't think so. A little less top boost. Cool. Now that we've done that, I want to add a little bit of tape saturation. This will just enrich everything. It'll give it a little more rhythmic glue. And maybe we can use it to bring things out even more. So we'll bring the meter up again, always with the meter. So I usually the default setting is pretty close already to good here. It's close enough. For this, maybe we'll add a little noise. Things to listen to is like, literally I feel like this plugin, we'll just try and turn it down a little bit, adds almost a like whole other level of, I don't want to say a whole other octave, but it really brings out the kick a lot, the punch there, and it brings out a lot of just kind of smooths out the high end and also just makes it a little more controlled. So on and let's see what the so we're pretty much there now. The main thing I just want to do is add a limiter and some stereo imaging and a little more EQ. And yeah, I think a lot of these EQ things probably should have been done in the mix. I should have spent a little more time dialing them in because we were pretty far out of whack. But this EQ stuff I will do by ear and also using the meters as opposed to relying on the AI. But what I am going to also do is set the limiter right now. It's about to get louder, and because then it'll make it easier to hear everything that we do. We're not going to be doing too much more. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set a ceiling of 1. That way we don't clip in if this song is exported or streamed or anything. I find like IRC4 just usually gets me a good result. With a kind of the character here, this usually just gets you where you want it to be, pretty close. So. Now we're just in a little bit. So this is different from the clipper, right? This is more like a compressor. Just when if things go over, it turns it down and doesn't let it get louder. And that sort of shapes the dynamics, can make things sound pumpy. So you don't want to overdo it. But right now, I mean, this was averaging, I think, -8, -9, which is plenty loud. Maybe it would even be too loud, but let's go with it. And so now we look at the fine here. with the master bus, I do not recommend making big changes. One thing I'm going to do is just put a little bit of high pass here, and we'll listen a little more closely to hear if these are doing anything. And that's as far, I mean, that's even farther than I kind of feel comfortable doing with the EQ, to be honest. You don't want to change the song's character too much. Like I should have just mixed the hi-hat. There's just not a lot of information there, so. Last thing to do is just to add this stereo imager, and this will just widen it a little bit, but I want to let you know I've been using imaging earlier in the track as well. So most of the imaging you want to do, hard pans, and you can use imagers on individual instruments and reverbs. This is just going to be for a touch more. I find mid-range presence is usually the right place to start with ozone. And let's take a listen. That all sounds pretty good to me. This is, as you saw, a very fast master, but I could do it faster if I wasn't talking. If you want to learn how to master, like I said, please register for that workshop. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to like and subscribe. If you've got any questions, leave them below. And I really am looking forward to hanging tomorrow and answering any mastering questions you have. Thanks. But before we go, I guess let's listen to it all with and without the mastering on. We'll leave the last part on so we have the volume. So this is just a little EQ imaging versus so much more rhythmic and controlled. Depth. So I really hope you attend and I can teach you some of these cool mastering tips and tricks. Bye.